and welcome to Worth the War. My name is Kimmy. The purpose of Worth the War is preparing people for healthy love and relationship and rethinking love, helping people to avoid abuse. If you think we can do a better job with love and relationship than we're doing today, you found the exact right channel. I hope you join us by subscribing and engaging and getting involved in our community here, and as well as all the other platforms that you'll see listed below that we're engaged in. Today, we are excited to bring back Steph Kollmar. Steph actually has done a couple other videos with topics for us, and I just want to introduce her to you so you get to know her a little better as she's developing a community of her own. Welcome, Steph.
Hi, Kimmy. Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yay, I'm excited. Steph is on Instagram, and she has some, and my cat is right in the middle here, and she has some community growing there, and she has a very storied history that I believe can be very helpful, not only in her process of healing and rebuilding her life, but also she's doing a lot to really kind of pour out, which is one of the amazing things about survivors is they often find that last few stages of healing is actually about pouring out to others. Can you tell us what you love doing right now, Steph?
Absolutely. Yes. So it's been a long journey. The journey to awakening and acceptance is probably the longest portion, because once you have the awareness, then it's really a few steps it takes to self-heal, self-soothe, and build those boundaries that are necessary to rebuild your nervous system. And the way that I've come to the conclusion of doing that and sharing my story has been writing a book. So that book, I'll be sharing the link very soon, is called Free to Feel, Creating Peace to Heal. And it's really about my journey of abuse and avoidance that led me to more abuse as an adult. And the experiences that took place in order for me to wake up, and how serious I took my self-journey, and the importance, I believe, of the self-love in that aspect in order to create the life that you really deserve to have.
And what a beautiful step into the idea of awakening. And what we're actually going to talk about today, I've gotten the opportunity to meet survivors, and I'm always amazed at the resiliency and the ability to rebound and survive and thrive. So today we're really excited because we're going to take some of the lessons that Steph has endured, really is the best word I can think of, and really ask her a question that occurred to me after we had spoken last time, which is, I'm not really sure how many people have endured abuse at the hands of their own family as a child, abuse within religious and spiritual institution, as well as abuse and domestic violence with some other issues that went along with that. She's endured more than we would obviously have want her to endure in any lifetime. We were really kind of getting down to what was the hardest type of abuse to heal from. And I can't think that anybody else is quite as qualified to answer that question than Steph would be. So Steph, what are your thoughts on this question?
Thank you, Kimmy. I put myself in each situation, from the church abuse from a leader, to familial abuse, to spousal abuse, to rape, to all of these situations that I experienced. And it kept bringing up this same feeling of disappointment, sadness, lack of trust. So I wasn't able to pinpoint, it was worse for me to be abused by a family member than a leader in the church, or from my husband, or from someone that I trusted that drugged my drink and raped me. It really came down to the fact of, because everybody's going to absorb this differently, right? So I didn't have a pinpoint of, it's terrible in each aspect, but what it did inside of my body was reiterate the lack of safety in my world. And the disappointment. So disappointment that I can't trust my family, disappointment that I can't trust the church, disappointment that I can't trust being so connected to a man within a relationship, and disappointment in not being able to trust a man walking down the street. So all of these aspects, there's a level of pain and sadness that I had to move through in order to be able to trust in general, even women, because there was abuse in that aspect as well. So You know, if I had healed my childhood abuse before I entered into the dating world, well, the spousal abuse likely wouldn't have been there. If I had healed and I had an understanding of boundaries, healthy expectations, self-value, I likely wouldn't have experienced what I did in my marriage, outside of my marriage, after my husband killed himself, the relationships that, you know, I got into that were all factors of that abuse. So I can't say that there was one type of abuse that is worse than the other. Our body absorbs sadness. Our body absorbs disappointment. It absorbs complete lack of safety that's surrounding us. And that is what is the hardest to heal from and come out of.
So if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that abuse has a thread of commonality, and that is where you have an expectation or a desire to feel safe, to feel protected. Essentially, the hardest step is realizing that you're not, you weren't, you should have been.
Yeah.
And I'll ask you this, and you feel free to answer it or not. Did you struggle with feelings of guilt?
Yeah, I did. You know, when I didn't recognize the abuse within the church until I was an adult. Recognizing the patterns of why was I so connected to this one man? And memories started flooding in of, you know, being in a basement room only with him in the basement of the church. Well, this is very inappropriate. What do you think was happening? And so the memories continued to flood. Yeah, so thank you for reminding me. That's why I brought up where the abuse initially started, because this man actually groomed siblings of mine to then carry abuse through family. And the guilt that I felt as an adult was, how did I not know that what was happening wasn't wrong, right? You go through these stages of shame and foolishness, and I should have said, I should have done. But I remember as a child, I was happy-go-lucky. There wasn't any guilt until I was about 12. And what was happening at home, which became a switch from a groomed playtime to an aggressive, forceful nighttime behavior. And at that point was when at 12, I became aware that what was happening was wrong, and I just shut it down, right? So then I shut down my emotions. I, you know, was argumentative then at home. As an adult, the guilt then was, I didn't save my younger sister from what continued after that. And as an adult, I didn't save my daughter from being molested by my husband, who then killed himself. So the guilt definitely was natural at the beginning as I became more aware of the patterns and what was carried through my body. I felt guilty for letting it happen to myself, as if I gave my power away, I'm to blame. And I think it's very natural in the steps of healing that we go through that, only then to recognize that the things that we could not control in those moments, the awareness now allows us to create those boundaries to close off any repetitive behaviors.
That's very helpful. I think that there's just so many splinter effects that come from abuse like this. And yeah, one of them is definitely, you know, they usually don't stop with you. What could you have done to keep that ball from rolling downstream? And yeah, and again, abuse doesn't come from inside you, it comes outside you, and you can't own all that. And that's a hard process. So I would say the last thing that I would ask you, and thank you for being so honest and open with us, because I really do think that somebody's ears probably need to know, you know, some of the things that you can only know till you've walked it. What would you say to someone who is just starting to wake up, and they might be young, they might be adults, you know, could be any age. What would you say to them about the awakening, the awareness that what's going on it may have been groomed, it may have been set up as perfectly normal, or even you used threats to keep you quiet? What would you say to help them?
At that point in time, I would highly suggest therapy. Is first and foremost cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as getting into meditation and all different forms of energy cleansing and clearing, and whatever it is that feels good, diving into yourself. I know on our previous video, I suggested bathing. In that sense of really staying connected to your body, I really encourage baths. Water is incredibly healing. In the quiet of the night when the kids are sleeping, not ideally when everyone's running around. But talking about it. If you can't trust those who are around you, there's plenty of platforms of therapists and psychotherapy that's available to first start in that process. And as long as your intention stands to dive in and love yourself first and create peace for your life, you'll get there.
That's very encouraging. I think that we need to be reminded that it can get really dark and get really heavy, but no matter what you've been through, there can be a tomorrow without abuse. And it may require an awful lot. Yeah, it's hard to get out of sometimes. And people are stuck in it and they think they'll never get out, but there's so many ways now, people you can reach out that aren't even within your own circle, which sometimes is actually healthier, or safer is probably the right word. It means a lot that you would take the time just to share your heart with us. I think that this is a hard subject. A lot of people don't want to look at it. They kind of want to think it just happens, and that we should just kind of shush. And I think the more that we shush it, and I do get that sometimes, I'll get, why are we digging into all this? And why do you want to talk about all this?
It's that underlying shame. And that's what I grew up with, was we don't talk about anything that's private. We don't face it. We move on and we forgive. And the problem with saying, I gave it to God and I let go, is that you're not actually facing who you are. You're not, you may never be validated by somebody else. But if the shame and those outside thoughts from everybody else that you're worried about hearing, bulldoze through them. It's the only way.
You have to. And I think the thing I would add to that is that it's easy. It's to say, I'm forgiven. Let it go. It's all, there's a step that they want to skip, and that step is restoration. And someone who isn't willing to restore, that might be taking some bills for therapy. That might be publicly saying, I wronged you. It could be any number of things. And it quite frankly comes down to the person who was wronged to decide what that is. And somebody doesn't have the right. And I'm a person of deep faith. I do believe in forgiveness. I do believe it's powerful. But I also believe that boundaries are super powerful. And if somebody isn't willing to take that restoration piece, I may give them forgiveness, but I'm not going to give them access. And they don't deserve access. That you dust your feet and you move on.
Yes, that's the most difficult within the family unit. Absolutely. Because you're expected, this is family. So you're going to break up the family because of boundaries. That's a big one, and the most common and very defeating for an individual who then is left to think, I'm going to be left alone in this world if I stand my ground and I say, I forgive you. You don't want to ask for forgiveness. You don't want to admit what you did to me, but I can't have you in my world anymore. That's the boundary I have. And to trust that you will be taken care of from there. There are plenty of people in this world that we can create loving relationships with. It is not worth holding on to the satisfaction of fear that holds us into those situations with the individuals that don't deserve our attention.
Well, right. And family isn't something that's just biological. And truth be told, a family member who uses that tie is no different than the doctor that says he's a doctor, but he sexually abuses his patients. They're using the title of family to get away with things that are not deserving of the word family. So I do believe that you're right, that family sometimes can be the hardest frontier to stand your ground and say, this is not going to be okay until you make it okay. And if you choose not to make it okay, I choose not to engage. If people don't understand that, they're really not for you. Because if they're really for you, they're going to understand you can only tolerate so much and still keep yourself and still care for yourself. And
absolutely.
That's not cruel. That's not mean. That's not unloving. And that's not, if you have a world belief, I don't think that you find anything in that world belief that's objectionable. I think it's okay to say, if you're not willing to be restorative, it's okay to walk to.
And to add, even if they are willing to be restorative, you can say goodbye.
You can, absolutely. Because sometimes even the restoration is just a vehicle to keep you connected. And I do agree with that. That can be manipulated. I do think that that's their only shot. Whether or not you give it to them or not, that's up to you. But very good. I'm really grateful for your time here, Steph. I really look forward to kind of going through this and seeing, I think there's a couple different things that might be really helpful for people, so we may just divide that up. Thank you for taking the time to be here today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Kimmy. Your platform is wonderfully built, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share. And I think that these topics are really important, and the more that somebody or society tries to brush things aside, the harder we need to push. It means it needs to be heard.
I totally agree, and I'm just really glad. I'm sure we'll have more in the future.